In an ongoing story, Robert F. Kennedy, even after dropping out of the election, is still impacting the election. We're going to talk about that today. So last week we covered about how RFK was still on several swing state ballots across the country, even though he's dropped out of the presidential race. Well, this is an ongoing problem for not only for him, but for Donald Trump more so. And we talked about this in a video that we made last week. I'll put this thumbnail up here on the screen just in case some of you want to go back and check out that video. There'll be more details in that one, but just a little brief recap. RFK Jr., obviously the independent candidate for president, did in fact drop out at the end of August. He went on to endorse Donald Trump, but since he's done that, he's had a hard time getting off the ballots in certain swing states where he's afraid that if he stays on the ballot, he will be, in fact, taking more votes from Donald Trump than from Kamala Harris. Therefore, he's been trying to withdraw his name off the ballot. Now, some states like Nevada, Pennsylvania, he's been able to get off the ballot pretty easily. But we're going to put a picture of this up on the screen now. This is a map where you can see where he is on the ballot. And you can see that there are several swing states in question where he is still actually on the ballot. And the swing states in particular, where we're talking about today, are Michigan, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. So first, let's start with an update on North Carolina. When we talked about this last, it was firmly in position, as we saw in that picture just now, that RFK Jr. was in fact going to stay on the ballots in North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, which is a big problem for Donald Trump because all of these states are supposed to be razor thin in their margins. So now, after North Carolina said that they couldn't take him off of the ballot because they had already printed all the ballots and it would just be impractical for them to go back and do it all over again, essentially saying that RFK dropped out too late in order for them to reprint these ballots. Well, now we can put this up on the screen. This is from The Hill. It says that top North Carolina court rules that ballots must be reprinted without RFK Jr.'s name. So from within the Hill article, it says that in this 4-3 decision on Monday, the state's top court said it was clear that Kennedy ended his campaign and that a vote for him would not count. The order stressed the importance of protecting the right to vote over other concerns. Quote, to protect this important right, the election process should ensure that voters are presented with accurate information regarding the candidates running for an elected office, the order reads. Where a ballot contains misleading information or inaccurately lists the candidates, it risks interfering with the right to vote according to one's conscience. This majority specifically noted that keeping Kennedy's name on the ballot could disenfranchise countless voters who mistakenly believe the plaintiff remains on the ballot for office. Now, we go further into the article here. It says the decision marks a significant win for Kennedy, who suspended his campaign in critical swing states more than 2 weeks ago and subsequently endorsed Donald Trump. The independent candidate has since launched an effort to remove his name from the ballots in the battleground states where the races get to be closer in November, a move aimed at boosting Trump's support. And you know what? Here's two things that I feel about this. One, it's kind of on Kennedy for waiting this long because it was probably pretty predictable that this could have happened. Given the fact, maybe some other states it's a little more egregious, but North Carolina in particular, they you know that they were going to be mailing out their ballots the first week of September. Now, maybe you think it's ridiculous that they have that large of an early voting window. I don't, but nevertheless, their rules have been on the books for a long time now. And so waiting until the last week of August to drop out, it's kind of a predictable outcome, all things considered. Let's just be honest about that. On the other hand, I understand, what they're saying in this piece here, that if a candidate is not actually running for president anymore, they shouldn't be on the ballot. So I can see both sides. That personally, I'm kind of getting a laugh at it because I think Kennedy's kind of not that serious of a candidate. I never thought he was, but I think he's kind of proven it the way he ran his campaign. But and I know that there were plenty of forces out there working against him. That's not really why I don't think he's a serious candidate. But moving on to Michigan. So we can put this up on the screen here by NBC Politics. This says that Michigan Supreme Court rules that RF Kennedy Jr. must remain on the state's presidential ballot in November, reversing a ruling from a lower court that had agreed to remove him last week. So in between our last video and this video now, There was a process that happened in Michigan where they tried to appeal to the courts there, saying like you have to take him off the ballot. And an appeals court did rule in Kennedy's favor. The state Supreme Court has now come out and said, actually, no, we are going to keep you on the ballot. So complete opposite of what's happening in North Carolina. So here's from CNBC. It says that the Supreme Court overturned the state's Court of Appeals ruling Friday that had removed Kennedy from the state's ballot against the wishes of Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. The majority decision by the High Court on Monday was unsigned, but the text of the order implies that 5 of the 7 judges or justices who considered the case voted to keep Kennedy's name on the ballot. Benson, in her decision, cited Michigan law, saying that minor candidates who accept a nomination cannot withdraw from an election. The majority in Michigan Supreme Court, in its ruling Monday, wrote that Kennedy has neither pointed out to any source of law that prescribes and defines a duty to withdraw a candidate's name from the ballot, nor demonstrated his clear legal right to performance of this specific duty. Thus, Kennedy has not shown an entitlement to an extraordinary relief, the court majority said in its ruling. Now, is there a partisan nature to all of this? I mean, it kind of feels that way. If I'm just being 100% honest, it definitely feels that way. It would not surprise me in the least, but also at the same time, I'm kind of the person where it's like, hey, if you go out of your way to run for office, and then at some point in time you decide that you're not going to run for office, it's just the consequences are kind of on you, especially the after the enormous effort that Kennedy took around the country to get on the ballot in all of these states. I mean, the consequences are kind of just they are what they are at that point in time. You kind of always run the risk. I mean, because every single state kind of operates their elections differently, and there's 50 different states with 50 different sets of election laws. This is always kind of the case. Now, we can kind of debate about whether or not these laws should exist, if we need more uniform laws, what exactly needs to transpire in order to make elections fair across the board. But, a part of me is kind of just like, hey, this is the territory that it is. And, as of right now, this is kind of what you sign up for when you put yourself into these situations. The last state that we want to give an update here on is Wisconsin. I'm going to put this up here from Wisconsin Public Radio. Looks like RFK Jr. is asking the appeals court to get him off the ballot in Wisconsin. So that is currently in progress here. Again, it's on one hand, it does feel incredibly partisan that certain states are like, yeah, we'll throw you off the ballot, no big deal. And other states are kind of like, no, but we're definitely keeping you on. But also, it's incredibly partisan on RFK Jr.'s part here as well, that he's only trying to get his name off the ballot in swing states because he's trying to make sure that Trump wins. This is after he based his whole entire campaign on being Biden and anti-Trump. And then once he found a way to kind of gain favor with one of the candidates who was running, he's now pushing his chips all in for that candidate. And it's all gross. I mean, it truthfully is, because when, I think so many people in this country truly want there to be a break in the duopoly, to be a break in the two-party system. And when you see one of the most popular third-party candidates that we've seen in a long time, not only bow out of the race, but now is actively endorsing one of those candidates, and is now trying to make sure that he can do everything possible to make sure that that candidate can win, it just is a slap in the face to everybody who's trying so hard to truthfully rebuke this two-party system. So, I guess there's a certain part of me that just can't find the irony, of not funny that he now is essentially having all of these issues, which again are kind of like a problem of his own making. If you didn't want to run for president, you shouldn't have run for president, truthfully speaking. But, nevertheless, him still being on the ballots, again, as I was saying before, this is going to have an impact on this election. It truthfully is. This is going to be a close election. Regardless of how you feel about Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, this is going to be a close election. Let's put this last thing up here on the screen. These are the current RCP polling averages for Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, the 7 swing states in question for this election. Look, all 7 of these have less than a 2 points advantage for either candidate. And it really is hard to predict exactly how accurate these polls are. You can make, and I'm going to be doing this before the election comes, you can make a strong case that the polls are significantly not factoring in certain things that will benefit Kamala Harris. And you can make the same argument that they're not factoring in certain things that should dramatically benefit Donald Trump. There is so much conflicting information out there right now. It's hard to know where this election is going to be, but I think through all the conflictedness, the one thing that's clear is that there seems to be a lot of advantages and disadvantages for both candidates, what kind of just equals out into where we all assume it's going to be, which is a razor thin outcome. So I think everything on the margins is going to matter. So this Kennedy being on the ballot in Wisconsin and Michigan, that is going to matter. Especially in states that are already favoring Kamala Harris. Donald Trump trying his best to like get into these blue wall states and reclaim them the way that he won them in 2016. It makes it less likely if Kennedy stays on the ballot in those states. Thank you for watching this video of Independent Thought. If you liked the conversation, please go ahead and give the video itself a like, and be sure to subscribe for future episodes on the channel.